Hi, everybody. Welcome once again to our weekly broadcast of MedHeads, MedCityNews.com's focus on the business of innovation in healthcare. My name is Chris Seper. I run MedCityNews.com, and we have a great trio of panelists who are with us today to talk, really get specific, not just about a region in the country, but probably one of the most important issues that we touch on a regular basis at MedCity and for the industry. And that's in really maximizing innovation opportunities. You know, we're in an era in healthcare where you really can't afford to leave any stone unturned when it comes to the issue of finding great opportunities and the next great breakthroughs. Right? It's too expensive. It's too important. The rules of the game have changed, and people are on the hunt for good opportunities. And one of the places that we almost always joke about, right, the flyover states, right, the place that, you know, a snowstorm in D.C. is called the afternoon in Minnesota, right, is the Midwest. The Midwest is a place of opportunity that many in the coast don't understand. Many internally in the Midwest struggle to make fit in the bigger national healthcare ecosystem. But it really can't end. You can't have that conversation that way anymore. You know, in a region that has Cleveland Clinic and Mayo Clinic, that has major offices of AbbVie and Medtronic and Eli Lilly, is seeing the digital health explosion here in unique and dynamic ways. Really, the national healthcare investor and entrepreneur community need to understand the Midwest. And so we're going to have that conversation right now, talking about that with three key panelists. And I also add that to me, this is, as I'm a Clevelander, and I'm born and raised in the Midwest, northwest suburb of Chicago. Having this conversation is important for me personally, and that's one of the reasons that MedCity News actually partners with the Mid-America Healthcare Investor Network to hold MedCity Invest. It's our investor conference that's based in Chicago. For us, it was critical that the Midwest needed a premier national healthcare investing conference to showcase some of the deal flow and convene that national group of investors and entrepreneurs that really make healthcare flow. So this is the same conversation. We'll have a conversation here, and we're going to continue that conversation in April, and we hope that you can join us on both fronts. That's my homily for today. And now I want to introduce you to the three panelists who are going to talk about this issue from really three different aspects. I'm excited to introduce Kathy Tune. She is a partner at Thomas McNerney and Partners, where she is investing in medical devices and diagnostics. She's also the president of the Mid-America Healthcare Investor Network. She's in Minnesota. Kathy, how are you?
Good, Chris, thanks.
Good. Just a few miles away is Shaye Mandle. He is the president of Medical Alley. He has the best office paint job of anybody that has ever been on MedHeads. Shaye, that's great. But his association handles all of healthcare, from digital health to biotech to medical devices, and advocates for them there in the Twin Cities. Shaye, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then here, just a few blocks from me in Cleveland, is Ray Leach. He is the president. He's the CEO of Jumpstart, that actually has 3 active funds seeking to attract and support Midwest startups, and particularly in Ohio. His most latest fund is actually a fund that's offering at least $500,000 to women and minority-owned businesses, and trying to attract them to the state of Ohio. Ray, thank you very much for joining us.
Great to be here.
Great. Well, I'm going to start off with a general question. I want each of you to really answer it, and I think it's a question that really is about understanding the Midwest. When you think about the healthcare ecosystem, when you think about healthcare activity here, how do you characterize it? How do you explain it? What's the opportunity? And Kathy, why don't we start with you?
Thanks, Chris. So, you know, I think in most respects, really, the Midwest is very similar to the other regions of the United States, where devices and other healthcare technologies are developed. You know, great scientists, great managers have to come together to generate these companies. So that's very similar. I think then when you look specifically at the Midwest, I think you really need to look at the exact location. So Minnesota is very focused on certain technologies, the most obvious being med device, and we have a fantastic team of our ecosystem here in that sector. Other areas have different sectors where they are strong. So I think it's really very much about kind of that individual geography and how they are strong in certain things. But I think the key criteria, just like on the East and West Coast, is great engineers, great resources in the education field. So universities are extraordinarily important here. And I guess one specific thing I might say is people are very sticky. The people that are here, and I think that's probably true of the other regions in this area, they stay. It's hard to get people here is what they say, but when they get here, the quality of life is high and they stay, and so there's a lot of loyalty and to the region once the people are here.
How about yourself?
Was that for me, Chris? I think it probably was. So I think there's a lot of similarities in Ohio and in Cleveland in particular compared to the Twin Cities. I think in this region we're a little bit further behind, at least from the last 20, 30 years perspective. The last 10 years has been an area or a time of significant development in both not only the medical device area, imaging and sensing, which has been a kind of a core concentration in greater Cleveland, but now more and more so in healthcare IT. So in Northeast Ohio in particular, there's a tremendous amount of energy focused on healthcare IT, and I think the other big differentiation that's a positive in Ohio is the partnership that organizations like mine called Jumpstart and others, BioEnterprise and other entities across the state have with the Ohio Third Frontier. So there's a very, very robust public-private partnership in Ohio that has invested hundreds of millions of dollars into the biotech, bioscience, pharma, healthcare IT space in Ohio to try to catch up with other parts of the country, and that's generated some very significant outcomes, particularly over the last handful of years. So I think one of the big differentiations here that other states in the Midwest and frankly other states across the country, one advantage here in Ohio is this collaboration that knows we're behind, we're willing to spend, in Ohio taxpayers are willing to spend significant monies to try to advance early stage, pre-seed, seed, Series A opportunities into the market.
And Shaye, what do you see?
Well, here, as you know, in Minnesota's Medical Alley, as Kathy mentioned, there certainly is a long history of great medical device work. We're also seeing tremendous explosion around diagnostics, digital health, and a lot of biotech and pharma actually beginning to sprout and grow here in Minnesota. And I think this is a Midwestern comment. I'm a native Midwesterner, as you are, Chris. And, you know, I think with technologies converging with innovation and healthcare policy coming together, I think really the healthcare expertise that exists here in the Midwest, so Mayo Clinic, you know, Ray is close with Cleveland Clinic, great teaching hospitals in Chicago. I think throughout the Midwest and the tremendous research at the University of Minnesota, as well as the University of Wisconsin, Northwestern, et cetera, you know, we really do have all of the ingredients here to take advantage of what has transpired in the Midwest over the last couple of decades and the connection between innovation and changes in the healthcare marketplace. And I think that's really what's going to continue to grow the Midwest over the next decade.
So, and Shaye,
You know,
Shaye, I guess I would add,
go ahead, Kat.
I would add just one thing, Shaye, that is, and I think it is in large part due to Medical Alley. The state of Minnesota has had a huge influence in Washington through the initiatives of a variety of parties, but Medical Alley, the companies, you know, our legislators have been tremendously supportive of the industry, and so when the industry has issues, they at least they know where to go, and they seem to be able to kind of coalesce and get things done.
I would echo that as a person who sat on the board of the National Venture Capital Association and in the biotech focus groups of NVCA. The collective leadership of the Midwest in Congress has been very meaningful throughout the Midwest. Obviously, different states have different levels of and seniority of leaders, but as a group, I think we are well organized and have been able to focus on particular issues and challenges. FDA is a great example where I think we've made real progress by partnering with our local leaders.
Well, let me jump in because it's interesting that everybody talks about support. You know, I think that you know, Minnesota, the Twin Cities had a tax credit. Ohio had the same thing. You saw support in, you know, lump in Pittsburgh and other areas had legislative support and matching dollars. what does that do to the investment climate here? Because their state money valuations more conservative, does it what impact is just injecting the cash? Think about that. Who's going to engage or an entrepreneur who's going to engage in the Midwest? I mean, what has those state dollars done to the process of investing?
Well, I mean, I'll
go to you,
jump
Shaye.
in. Yeah. Well, I can tell you here in Minnesota, in the last year, about 60% of the first raise new start companies in the life sciences took advantage of the angel investor tax credit. So, clearly it is having a tremendous impact. As what it does is limits a little bit of risk, and certainly when your early stage companies are life science companies, be they biotechnology or medical device, there's significantly more risk than there tends to be if you're investing in, an app company. So, I think for us in the Midwest that tend to focus on more complex technologies in the sector of healthcare, it's really been helpful to sort of take that edge off. I know in Minnesota, as we look at the amount of tax dollars that the state has spent in order to deliver those credits, the amount of money raised by those companies has produced a 10x return. So, we as a state have put out, we've had a little more than $20 million or so consumed over the last couple of years in angel investor tax credits, and those companies have raised more than $235 million. So certainly here in Minnesota, it's working. In addition to that, we've seen over the last couple of years records in terms of total fundraising. We've seen records in terms of new company starts, and that is in every sector. We're seeing it in digital health. We're seeing our early stage pharma companies. We've seen 167% growth in new starts and new raises since 2013. So, for us, the angel investor tax credit, I think there are metrics that demonstrate that it has had a significant impact and really been great for our state.
So certainly from an Ohio point of view, the Ohio angel investor tax credit was maybe not one of the first angel programs, but it certainly was very early on in the aughts, 2003 to 2008 or 9, was a real driver to the increasing angel investment across all sectors, including biosciences. And our current governor is very, very focused on lowering all tax rates for all Ohioans. So given this and is not pro tax credit in any sense for any use or almost any use. So certainly the climate that gets created around and the political philosophy around tax credits, administration to administration, does evolve and change. And so today Ohio doesn't have the angel tax credits that it had before. Having said that, the Ohio Third Frontier has very much ratcheted up its focus on investing at the pre-seed, seed, and now even early Series A stage. So while there are perhaps less incentives for individual angels in Ohio to invest from a personal tax benefit, there's been hundreds of millions of dollars committed by the Ohio Third Frontier over the last 3, 4 years, 5 years that are focused squarely on that pre-seed and seed, and now Series A. And in order to win that money, depending on the kind of money that fund managers or leaders or groups are trying to raise, they need to provide at least 1-to-1, or in some cases up to 3-to-1 match. So Ohio, over the last handful of years, has taken a different approach. Jumpstart loves angel tax credits. We think that those are great tools to be leveraged. Having said that, Ohio has certainly not walked away at all from supporting pre-seed, seed, and Series A companies. It's just taken a little bit different and more collectively organized capital approach as opposed to an individual Ohio approach.
Kathy, let me ask you something, and I want to stick on the valuations part. I think there is a perception that valuations, it's easier to get a better valuations, at least, and I can confirm this. Oh, Kathy, can you hear me?
Oh, I missed part of that question.
Kathy,
I think you were referencing valuation differences between the coast and the Midwest. Yep.
Sure.
So,
yeah, I
think that, I mean, it is true, I would say, to some degree. That said, when a deal is hot, the deal is hot, and it's going to get a high valuation. That no matter where it is, if it's led by, you know, a very experienced set of entrepreneurs, and it's got a technology or a product that has a huge potential, it's going to garner the same valuation regardless of where it is. I think what you see on a valuation differential is a lot of the early stage, especially technology deals, I'm talking health IT and other technology deals on the especially West Coast, the valuations get high quickly, the deals go fast. One of my colleagues just started a new healthcare IT fund out in San Francisco, and if she has more than 5 weeks to go from start to finish to term sheet, that's quick, and she's missed a number of deals due to time and valuation. So I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag, but the best deals are still going to garner a lot of attention and a lot of interest.
And certainly once you get to, at least in the Midwest, you get to Series B or Series C, the upside valuations, the positive company valuations can be realized. I think the valuation gap, Midwest vis-a-vis other parts of the state, are really at the seed in the Series A, maybe Series B. But once the companies get to a higher level of credibility and traction, then obviously that stuff goes away. So from an entrepreneur, if you can find a way to raise the capital, you're likely to own a larger piece of the company in the Midwest. The challenge is the balance between, obviously that early stage valuation and being able to raise the amount of capital you need to make a significant traction in the first year or two.
Looks like Chris's audio might be frozen.
Yeah. Chris, you're talking, but we can't.
We cannot hear you.
Nope, he's still frozen. Well, we can still lead the conversation without Chris.
Sure.
He can hear us probably, right?
Okay.
So let me ask you guys a question and maybe present kind of thesis. I think one of the things that at least I think I am seeing is that there's a fairly significant shift in the investor profile of these of the companies across the country, including in the Midwest, and that shift that I see is both from the names of the firms, so the firms have changed a little bit, but also the dynamic of who the investors are. So we used to have a predominance of venture, probably investing in deals in healthcare, because healthcare tends to take more money than other types of investments. Now it's a mix of all kinds of things. It's pieced together from a lot of angel investing, family offices, corporate investing, international investors. That's what I think I'm seeing. I don't know, Ray and maybe Shaye, for the data you guys pull.
Yeah, our data. So I think, Kathy, when we started the process of gathering this data, we wanted the data to truly reflect the impact that dollars were having. So, most data collection, PwC, Money Tree, and others were pretty limited to a more traditional venture capital and that survey. So our investor report actually chronicles everything. And you're right, there has been a significant increase in angel funding. Really a big increase, not just in, I'll say, the corporate and strategic side, but the diversification of that. It's Blue Cross Blue Shield, it's United Healthcare, it's Boston and Medtronic and St. Jude and 3M. And so, we're seeing, really large companies that have any touch point with the healthcare system getting engaged in the process of innovation, putting dollars in. Optum's got its garage, and you see here in Minneapolis places like Treehouse Health that are bringing some of these large players from different pieces of the healthcare sector together. And so I do think the opportunity for entrepreneurs to engage in smart money raising from a broader and more diverse pool of capital is certainly what we're seeing here in the Twin Cities. And our record numbers of raise that we've demonstrated over the last couple of years truly represents a diverse pool of sources of that capital.
Any luck hearing me, folks?
Oh, we can hear you.
Can hear you.
Hey, look at that. Listen, I actually am going to log off now because you guys were so great at this. I don't think I should say anything else.
I think one of the comments to the point about diversification, one of the comments I'd have about diversification, which I think is very true, particularly when you don't have, we only have realistically in the bioscience space one venture fund headquartered in Ohio that's actively doing deals in the space for the entire state. That's a classic VC. So I think given that scenario, not only is the diversity required, but I think the other dimension is it brings a different level of breadth, depth, and challenge to the entrepreneur, particularly the entrepreneur who hasn't raised money from that mixture of sources. If someone's experienced, then typically they can figure that out. But we've seen the services for our organization and organizations like ours across the state being more important because you're going to cobble together the capital from maybe a dozen different places as opposed to 3 VCs who were viewing the deal in the same way and kind of are used to working together. So the skill set of the entrepreneur raising the capital now and the relationships he or she needs to have to be able to raise the money in less than a handful of months is very different today than what it was 5 years ago.
Kathy, do you see that? Do you see many of the entrepreneurs you deal with in the Midwest are early entrepreneurs? And is there a way that you funnel some of your Midwest deals out into the coast that is different the way that they coast funnel deals in or syndicate with you?
That's a good question. I mean, part of the I believe the job of venture and everyone in the ecosystem is to facilitate introductions, facilitate deal flow, etc. So we do that. We try to keep in our minds some set of profiles of these various investors and say, okay, who's doing what, who do we think is doing what, and try to make those introductions when we run across a deal that may not be a fit for us but might be a fit for others, or it is a fit for us, then we need to syndicate. So we would then go to certain parties, to hopefully the targeted parties. So I think that is part of the ecosystem. That's the way it works. Do they funnel deals here? I would say not as much probably, and especially in for example, a hot San Francisco health IT deal, I doubt anyone's going to be picking up the phone and calling, across the country to say, do you want in? They're probably not going to do that.
One of the key important things is in this conversation is strengths of the Midwest, the academic partnerships. We said it at the beginning, having Mayo Clinic, having the technology transfer opportunities that are in Chicago, and they have a unified organization. But it does seem like there have been opportunities for there to be more funds leveraging the current ecosystem, and it's kind of faltered, right? Ohio State and Ohio University, for example, have wanted to start a private venture fund for a while. They even had somebody on the coasts picked to run it, and that's stumbled. Probably about 4 or 5 years ago, Mayo Clinic tried to partner with an external group to leverage the Mayo name and invest in companies, and that didn't work out very well. Are institutional challenges that just exist in the Midwest in trying to get some of these additional funding opportunities locally off the ground? And Shaye, you probably see this as somebody who's been running a trade group and seeing it from all sides.
Yeah, certainly, as it relates to how business works with universities and, how easy it is to raise large funds. I mean, there are differences in the country. There's a reason that, the majority of the venture capital is actually parked in the world in California, and that is what it is. And I don't think, I think the whining about that any place outside of California is a waste of time. I think at the end of the day, the basics of building great businesses are what attract capital. Yeah. I think here in the Midwest, there's a blessing and a curse a little bit in that if you look at the academic research infrastructure in the country, in fact, the Midwest is, the most talent and innovation-rich sector of the country. 7 of the 10 biggest schools in the country are Big Ten schools. You look at the laundry list of NIH and NSF funding, and the Midwest, through the Big Ten schools predominantly, just kills it. And so we certainly have that research infrastructure. I think that what we've started to see, and I think the University of Minnesota has done a great job with this recently, is schools start to engage industry in different ways. So we put some policies in place at the University of Minnesota, making licensing and collaboration quicker, easier, sort of one price and first rights of negotiation later on, which has seen a lot of increase then in investment and collaboration with the university, but also institutions. And Ray will talk about the Cleveland Clinic, but Mayo Clinic has transformed itself dramatically in the last few years. They're currently advancing the Destination Medical Center project. We're talking about a $3 billion project over the next 3 years that's going to add 20,000 people to the Mayo Clinic enterprise, including in research. One of our board members, Jim Rogers, that heads up Mayo Ventures, they have partnered with, Sequoia and Draper Fisher and Baird Capital, and Mayo's done work with Apple. And so I think at least here in the Twin Cities and the connection to Mayo, I think we're seeing institutions that really are understanding how we can drive changes in healthcare. And I think across the board in the Midwest, you're seeing a lot more activity. I mean, when people talk about great medical centers, they talk about Mayo and they talk about Cleveland Clinic, and you're seeing a lot more activity in Chicago. So I think some of this, quite frankly, isn't that the activity, the great partnerships, the great organizations haven't been in place. I think part of the problem is just as good Midwesterners, we're probably not telling our story often or loudly enough.
I think another big driver, I agree with all that. I think another driver is, are there teams in the Midwest, investing teams in the Midwest, who have been serially successful investing together and want to stay and raise funds 2, 3, 4, and 5. I mean, I think there is a talent gap on the investing side generally across the board. That is a real challenge. I mean, the institutions can have their acts together, and tech transfer can improve its performance, but at least in Ohio, we have a real challenge of, are there a handful of successful investing teams who've been together, who have a reputation with their LPs, of course with entrepreneurs in the market, to generate great returns for their investors and be great partners to entrepreneurs. And the reality is, at least for Ohio headquartered funds, and I realize there's lots of funds doing deals outside their headquarters state, we're behind. And the gestation period for those kinds of teams is a minimum of 3 to 5 years. So if you lose a couple teams in a particular state, particularly a state as large as Ohio, if you lose a few teams that, because of the 2008 recession or for whatever reason, it sets a state back, and it can set a entrepreneurial ecosystem back for a decade, not just for the 3 to 5 years. So a lot of our orientation in terms of an ecosystem builder is not just helping the actors, whether it's the healthcare institutions, our connections to them, or the universities perform better, but try to attract talent either back to the Midwest or bring teams together of really smart investors who maybe haven't operated as a team in the past. Give them incentives to form a team that has the ability to raise a fund and really have an at bat as a fund. And hopefully they'll be successful, and we can regain the momentum that we kind of lost through the end of the last decade and the first part of this decade.
Well, we're at time, so what I'd like to do is I just want to ask one more question to each of you real quick. If you could change one thing to improve the environment in the Midwest, or one message that you could get out to attract either both the startup community or the investor community in the Midwest, what would Shaye? We'll start with you.
Well, I think all of us in the Midwest, if we could change one thing,
did
make the weather better. But since we cannot change that, I think the thing that I would change here in the Midwest, I think because there isn't as much money parked here, I think entrepreneurs in the Midwest start from the premise that there aren't access points in the Midwest, that they need to figure out how to get someplace else as quickly as possible. And so if there's one thing I would change, it would be that entrepreneurs, first-time entrepreneurs in particular, know what their more experienced peers know, which is that Minneapolis, Chicago, Cleveland, and other places in the Midwest are great places, and maybe better than the coast to actually build quality businesses. And so, I think organizations like ours can help. But I think the first talent in issue of people fresh out of school with new ideas, really interested in having an impact, going to Chicago and Minneapolis and other places, as opposed to going and trying their hand on the coast. I think that's what I would change, is making it easier to get people to understand what's happening in our community, so that when they graduate from school in Florida or Texas, that they get on a plane and come to Minneapolis first, because they see the opportunities there.
Kathy, what about you?
Yeah, I guess I would echo a lot of that as well. I think getting the word out is really important, and making people understand what is here, and getting people here. I mean, I think that is always a challenge, and I think it goes in waves. And right now we have a little bit of a dip, although that doesn't tie with Shaye's data, I think. But from a venture standpoint, it feels like there's a little bit of a dip in some parts of the ecosystem right now, and so need to get the word out, get people on planes, and get here. And that's a bit of it's a lot of networking, it's a lot of conversations that have to happen.
My comment would echo the other two, in that at the end of the day, when you're working on in the areas that the three of us are focused on, you cannot underestimate the power of and the importance of marketing and communications. And so in our case, we've had a handful of really significant exits in Northeast Ohio over the last year that I think many people in the community weren't sure could be realized, given that this environment or ecosystem is really built a little 10 years ago, is kind of when the founding of a lot of these new things are happening. So let's make sure that entrepreneurs all across the country, and venture capitalists, both strategic and traditional venture, understands that you can invest in companies in the Midwest and achieve really significant exits, and change people's lives as well. So I think the communication piece cannot be understated.
Well, I want to thank all three of you for taking part in this conversation. As I said before, this is an important one to me as we unearth innovation everywhere, to maximize the opportunities in healthcare. And we're doing this conversation not just on the site Med Conference in April, which is partnered with Kathy's organization, MHIN, for Kathy Tune and for Ray Leach and for Shaye Mandle. I'm Chris Seper, and I hope you enjoyed this MedHeads, and will come back to us next week.